Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching the Daily Report for Monday, November 15th. I'm Min Sanhee. Countries in the Northern Hemisphere, including Korea, are working to boost their defense against the pandemic as resurgences challenge efforts to live with COVID-19. We cover this reality in our broadcast on this Monday. Here first is the global pandemic update with our Kwon Soa.
Sunny, we're starting off the first day of the work week with over 2,000 infections, which is a concern. 2,006 cases were tallied as of 12 a.m. and that includes 1,986 domestic transmissions and 20 cases from abroad. And with that, it is a drop by more than 400 cases from the day before, but usually we do see this drop happening on a Monday. And if we compare this Monday figure to last Monday, it is actually an on-week surge. And also, if we take a look at our map, most cases are still concentrated in the metropolitan region. Roughly 8 out of 10 cases in Seoul, Gyeonggi-do province or Incheon, which are all seeing triple-digit figures, with the rest of the country mainly in the double digits. And if we move over to our general figures here, more than 397,400 cases in total here in Korea, with a death toll at 3,115. And recently, we've been seeing double-digit numbers of daily fatalities, 12 added this Monday. And also the number of patients that are in severe or critical condition has been in the 400s in recent days, standing at 471 as of this Monday, which is, however, a drop from the weekend. Now let's move over to our vaccination figures. So 41.9 million people have received at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine. And we have also recently reached a milestone here, over 40 million, now 40.1 million people have been fully vaccinated as of this Monday. Let's move over to figures abroad. Over 354,000 new cases were counted in the past 24 hours, the total standing at 254 million, with more than 5.1 million people having lost their lives due to COVID-19 around the world. Now, there were some grim milestones over the weekend reached here. Russia has become the 5th country in the world that has hit the 9 million mark in total cases. And then we've also got here Germany, which has hit the 5 million mark. And now this Monday, as of noon Korea time, also surpassed Colombia in the total caseload. Meanwhile, Ukraine has surpassed Poland in its total infection caseload. And those are the general updates that I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for now. Right, for more coverage of the local COVID-19 situation as we begin our third week of life with COVID-19, I have Kim Yeon-seung back here in the studio. Yeon-seung, welcome back.
Feels great to be back, Sunny.
Right, let's begin with the government's response then to the current resurgence here on the local front.
Right. Well, as Sohan mentioned earlier, we are seeing an increase in critical cases across the nation, and health authorities have said earlier that they might hold off on the further easing of restrictions if the country sees more than 500 critical cases daily, because a tally over that threshold could potentially overwhelm the country's healthcare system. And as you know, it's concerning because the current trend does show the country might not be too far from reaching that mark. Seoul and Incheon both have 75% of their ICU beds filled, and almost 60% of ICU beds are occupied nationwide. Of course, health authorities still need to take time to fully assess the magnitude of the situation. They said earlier today that they're going to take into account all aspects of our circumstances before they make the decision to apply a circuit breaker. They're going to first look if it's possible to expand our medical capacity, whether they could acquire more medical beds and ICU units, and then assess where the infections are most likely to occur. And then they're going to strengthen prevention measures specifically in those areas. So this might actually include expanding vaccine passes or lowering the cap on social gatherings depending on the situation. They're going to announce the entirety of this contingency plan, and it will entail all the specific guidelines on the types of measures the nation will take in certain situations.
Right, and the announcement itself, Yeon-seung, will be made on Tuesday then?
Yes, it will.
Right. But meanwhile then, what's happening on the vaccination front?
Right. Well, starting from Monday, the booster shot campaign has been expanded to everybody over the age of 50 and including 50. So booster shots will become available to those in their 50s, people with underlying conditions, and people working in essential services who were fully vaccinated at least 6 months ago. South Korean Health Minister Kwon Duk-chul is actually part of this vaccination campaign. He will be eligible for the shot starting Monday. So he's actually receiving his third jab this afternoon. Registration for boosters began last month, but if anyone decides to get the jab at the last minute, surplus vaccines can also be booked at vaccination centers across the nation.
Right, Yeonsung, that is good to know. Well, thank you for now, but do stay for the extended talk. Right, meanwhile, for the latest remarks from health authorities here with regard to the current outbreak, I have Swa back at the desk. So, Swa, what is the official assessment as of this Monday?
Well, Sunny, despite the concerning figure this Monday, the weekly trend in cases, according to officials this Monday, shows us not an immense rise for now. In its latest evaluation of the COVID-19 situation in Korea, an average of 2,172 domestic transmissions have been posted in the past week, which is up by 1.8% from the previous week. One index that's both positive and negative is the reproduction rate, which stands at 1.05, which is down from 1.2 from the week before, but still above 1, which indicates a rise in transmissions. Seniors aged 60 and above accounted for 32.6% of total infections, while 20.6% were kids under the age of 18. This age group has accounted for some 20% of cases every week since the third week of October. Infections among the elderly and younger population are concentrated at senior facilities such as nursing hospitals and education facilities as well.
Right, I see. And so early on this Monday morning, I hear the Health Minister Kwon Duk-chul addressed the current challenges as well, right? Tell us more.
Yes, Sunny. So highlighting that it's been now 2 weeks since Korea has shifted into the first phase of living with COVID-19 strategy. The minister took note of the fact that the number of patients in serious or critical conditions stands in the 400s every day lately, and that it needs all-out efforts from the government as well as the public to prevent a worsening situation. So let's take a listen to his concerns.
The major variables include the rise in indoor activities due to the colder weather, the growing number of breakthrough cases, the roughly 10 million unvaccinated people here in the country, especially children and adolescents, and lax attitudes toward the risk of infection. We fear that transmissions among teenagers may rise as in-person learning fully resumes following the nationwide college entrance exams, while much delayed year-end gatherings also pose a significant risk factor.
To minimize chances of infections among students ahead of the college entrance exam or 수능, all high schools have turned to remote learning since last Thursday, which is why the government is voicing its concerns following the test. Once students return back to school, and probably also when seniors are temporarily free from their academic pressure and choose to move around more. Meanwhile, the full resumption of in-person classes that Health Minister Kwon mentioned will be in effect beginning next Monday, including in the capital Seoul, as part of the nation's gradual return to normalcy scheme.
Right, and also so there have been fresh calls from the government for members of the public to better support the booster campaign, right?
Right, Sunny. So that is because we have been seeing that the majority of infections have occurred among the elderly and the younger population. The younger population meaning those the teenagers which have just recently started to receive their first shots. So it is that older population where the effects of the first and second shots appear to be waning right now, and that has also led to the rising number of critical patients, which is why an official at the earlier meeting, the earlier government briefing that is, backed the need for booster shots by showing the chance of developing severe symptoms by age group. So let's take a listen to that.
The analysis we conducted on COVID-19 patients starting in April shows that around 3.1% of unvaccinated people developed serious illnesses, a rate 5 times higher than the 0.57% among those who've been fully vaccinated. The fatality rate, meanwhile, was seen at 0.36 and 0.13% respectively, showing that the risk of death in people without immunity were 3 times higher than their fully vaccinated peers.
And the official also stressed that although the government is looking for some emergency measures at this point, because we are seeing this more number of hospital beds that are needed for the critically ill patients, despite that, they are ruling out that we will go back to measures such as social distancing measures at level 3 or 4 that we have been seeing before, but rather they will really focus on having those booster shots for bigger number of people in that age group, those people aged 60 and above.
Right. Meanwhile, elsewhere, I understand over in Europe, where you've been mentioned quite a bit last week, the resurgence there, Yeon-seung, has quite a few countries choosing to reimpose tough prevention measures. Tell us more.
Right. Like you said, Europe is resurging as a hotspot for the viral infections, and some countries are putting down quite drastic measures in response to these latest hike in numbers. So, for example, Austria has declared a lockdown for all unvaccinated citizens. So all unvaccinated citizens over the age of 12 are not allowed to leave their homes unless they're going to work, grocery shopping, or going for a walk. They will also not be allowed to shop in clothing, sports, or furniture shops anywhere that sell goods other than basic supplies. This move will affect more than 20% of the country's population, which sums up to around 9 million. And anyone who violates this rule will be fined up to $1,660.
A concept has been developed that will enable checks on an unprecedented scale. As of tomorrow, every citizen, every person living in Austria must be aware that they can be checked by the police at any time.
Austria has less than a fifth of South Korea's population, and they've reported more than 10,000 cases lately, so it is in part understandable why health authorities are finding this surge so concerning, that they felt the need to impose drastic measures. But as you can imagine, this move is sparking massive backlash and protests. Netherlands has also rolled back its COVID-19 restrictions, reimposing lockdowns for the first time in 2 months. They're closing down eateries, cafes, supermarkets at 8 p.m. and all non-essential establishments by 6 p.m. as they saw 16,000 cases in a country of 17 million.
And Yeon-seung, I believe many other European countries might follow suit with these countries that you just mentioned. For instance, Germany, which has been seeing record high numbers recently, may have some concrete answers towards new measures later this Thursday, with its health minister calling on everything necessary to contain the fourth wave there.
Right, and I have Jan Rubel lined up later on the program to tell us more about the situation over in Germany. Meanwhile, so let's end today's talk on a bright note. Tell us about the travel bubble between Korea and Singapore.
Right, Sunny. In a line with that travel bubble, starting Monday, people from Singapore are allowed to travel freely to South Korea without the need for quarantine due to the agreement that was agreed upon in October. So what this means is that individuals in large groups of travelers don't need to take a 7-day quarantine or take 3 PCR tests when entering. However, travelers still have to show a negative PCR test on arrival and then take another test at the airport. South Koreans heading to Singapore have to undergo similar steps. Following the travel bubble agreement with Saipan and Singapore, the South Korean government plans to expand the list of countries, hoping to make the third travel bubble with the United Arab Emirates. Meanwhile, more countries are opening their borders to fully vaccinated travelers from South Korea. Guam, Thailand, and 20 countries in Europe are allowing them to travel freely without quarantine.
I see. Well, that's good to know. All right. So as always, thank you very much for the coverage. And Yeon-seung, thank you. I'll see you back on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Prospects are reportedly looking up for a formal declaration to end the Korean War. Now, this is according to Seoul's Vice Foreign Minister on Sunday over in Washington, where he is slated to meet with his US and Japanese counterparts. Ji-young reports.
South Korea's Vice Foreign Minister says good news is expected regarding the declaration of a formal end to the Korean War. First Vice Foreign Minister Choi Jong-gun told reporters at Washington Dulles International Airport on Sunday that the most important factor is that South Korea and the U.S. reach an agreement in terms of the means of ending the war. Choi said the two countries agree on pushing ahead with Seoul's proposal to declare formally ending the war, but are discussing how and when it could be done. He also said that results are expected soon, after which the proposal will be shared with North Korea. Choi added that another important factor to consider is the North's reaction to the agreement and then how to move forward with the regime from there. In an answer to the question over the possibility of a positive response from Pyongyang, he said that it cannot be guaranteed. The vice minister departed for Washington on Sunday for talks with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts. There he'll hold a three-way meeting with the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman and Japan's Vice Foreign Minister Mori Takeo on Tuesday local time. This is the first vice ministerial meeting involving the three countries in 4 months. They previously met in Japan in July. Expected issues on the agenda include the proposed declaration of an official end to the 1950 to 1953 Korean War and tackling global supply chain crisis. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Washington and Beijing are fine-tuning details ahead of this week's planned virtual summit between Presidents Joe Biden and Xi Jinping. And while the importance of the upcoming summit has been mutually acknowledged, that is, the two sides remain at odds over Taiwan-related matters. Kim Yo-san explains.
Ahead of the highly anticipated virtual summit between the leaders of the U.S. and China, the top diplomats of the two countries have spoke over the phone. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken used the opportunity to express concern over Beijing's continued military, diplomatic, and economic pressure against Taiwan. According to the State Department, Blinken also emphasized a long-standing U.S. interest in peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. He also urged China to take part in meaningful dialogue to resolve issues in a peaceful manner. In response, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi called on Washington to clearly and resolutely oppose any moves in Taiwan for independence. Such sharp remarks come as relations between Beijing and Taipei are at their lowest points in decades, with strong rhetoric and increased military posturing. On the upcoming Biden-Xi summit, Wang stressed its great significance not only for U.S.-China relations, but also for international relations. Blinken also stressed the meeting presents an opportunity for the superpowers to discuss how to manage competition between the two countries while ensuring close coordination and cooperation in areas where their interests align. The summit between Presidents Biden and Xi, slated to be held on Monday evening Washington time and Tuesday morning in Beijing, is the first between the leaders since President Biden entered the White House in January. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
On the local front, domestic demand for electric vehicles has boosted Korea's standing within the global arena in terms of sales. Pundits are also linking the standing to broader government support. Yoon-jin has more.
Global sales of electric vehicles came to roughly 3 million units in the first 9 months of 2021, and South Korea ranked 7th largest in terms of sales, moving up 1 place from an 8th place ranking for the previous 2 years. According to data from the Korea Automotive Technology Institute released on Monday, sales of EVs in South Korea almost doubled in the first 3 quarters of this year from a year earlier. Between the months of January and September of 2021, a total of around 71,000 EVs were sold domestically, marking a 96% increase from a year before. With the jump, electric vehicles accounted for 5.5% of all new vehicles sold in South Korea this year, making it the second highest Asian country behind China's 9.4% and more than double the U.S.'s 2.3%. The Korea Automotive Technology Institute outlined that government support of eco-friendly electric vehicles, paired with overall greater awareness of EVs, continued to push EV sales. Tesla was the top global EV seller with roughly 626,000 units sold this year, followed by China-based SAIC Motor with around 413,000 units. South Korean auto giant Hyundai Motor Group sold roughly 160,000 EVs, ranking 5th highest in the world. The institute says in order for South Korea to further solidify its stance as a global EV manufacturer, the current ongoing semiconductor supply crisis needs to be settled, along with a secured supply of batteries. 이은진, Arirang News.
And researchers here have developed an AI doctor that can predict cardiovascular conditions with an accuracy of about 90%. Cho Sung-min has details.
Cardiovascular diseases such as heart attacks and stroke are one of the leading causes of death in South Korea. Because these illnesses tend to show up without any major red flags, regular checkups and preemptive measures are needed in order to prevent them. So South Korea has developed a type of AI-based software dubbed Dr. AI, which can predict the development of any acute symptoms 2 years in advance based on people's current health. Although collecting patient data is prohibited by law, the software can make predictions by using data from separate AI programs installed in hospitals.
Dr. AI uses various techniques seen in artificial intelligence programs at several general hospitals and displays over 90% accuracy in predicting a patient's future condition. It allows us to optimally diagnose and treat each patient.
The developers plan to boost the program's accuracy by further expanding cooperation with more medical institutions. They are also working on widening the program's capabilities so that it could be used for different illnesses such as cancer or diabetes.
We plan to commercialize the program by the end of next year, so the service is available to patients.
Experts believe Dr. AI will help treat and manage patients at small and medium-sized hospitals where data from clinical trials is lacking, as well as help improve contactless diagnosis systems in the post-pandemic era. Cho Sung-min, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. At least 68 prisoners were killed and more than 24 others injured as another prison riot broke out in Ecuador on Saturday. The deadly violence occurred at the Penitenciaria del Litoral, the same prison where 119 inmates were killed in September in what was the country's worst ever incident of prison violence. Just as with previous incidents, the latest event comes amid another clash between gangs inside the prison.
These events are due to a territory dispute by criminal gangs inside the prison. At the moment, there are certain pavilions that are without leaders. Because this may be surprising to all citizens, those leaders were released after having served 60% of their sentence.
Ecuador has seen a number of deadly incidents within its prisons, with 79 inmates killed in February and 22 in July. Ecuadorian President Guillermo Lasso in September declared a 60-day state of emergency in the prison system, freeing up government funding and allowing for military assistance to control prisons. At least one person is dead after 2 strong earthquakes struck southern Iran on Sunday. The quakes measured magnitudes of 6.3 and 6.4 as residents in Hormozgan province fled their homes.
I was busy with work when I suddenly saw the building was shaking very violently. First, we said this will end quickly, then we saw it took longer. It happened for 30 seconds.
Officials say the quake was felt in several cities in the province, as well as across the Gulf in Dubai. Despite the 2 earthquakes, no structural damage to homes in the area has been reported. The Chief Minister of New Delhi has ordered a week-long closure of all schools amid worsening pollution in the Indian capital.
For a week from Monday onwards, all the schools will be physically closed. Virtual classes will continue so that the children don't have to come out and breathe polluted air.
With no wind expected to blow throughout most of the week, the minister added that construction activities will also be shut down from Sunday to Wednesday. The air quality index on Sunday hit 470 on a scale of 500, marking levels of pollution in the air that will affect healthy people and seriously impact those with existing diseases. New Delhi is often ranked the world's most polluted capital, facing extremely bad air in winter due to crop stubble burning, emissions from transport, coal-fired plants outside the city, and other industrial emissions. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Autumn is an appealing season here in capital Seoul, given the mild temperature and vibrant colours. Up next, we share with you one way of making the most of the fall here in the capital city via a scenic bus tour around popular landmarks. I have Chun Song-cho standing by. Song-cho, welcome.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
Right, so Song-cho, you are on a bus right now.
Yes, as you can see, I'm on the top of a running bus, which is quite unusual, I have to say. This is not a regular bus, but it's a double-decker Seoul City tour bus that takes you around Seoul, as you mentioned. So yes, the bus departed from the DDP or the Dongdaemun Design Plaza about 10 minutes ago, and we're already passing through what looks like Myeongdong area or Iljiru area right now, which is right in the heart of downtown Seoul. The bus is taking the traditional culture course, which means we get to stop by places including palaces and traditional markets. I have to say I was a little bit worried about today going on a open top bus in the cold, but actually the weather is wonderful today. I mean, I'm just enjoying so much being out in the open and just soaking in the sunshine, and I get to see the beautiful Seoul's landscapes. Plus, Seoul's autumn foliage is a beautiful sight, and it's even better from higher up. And now I get to admire these bright yellow ginkgo trees at eye level, and I'm enjoying it so much. So currently, there are about less than 10 people on the bus because it is a weekday, so it's not too busy right now on the bus. So if you want to enjoy this tour, then all you need is a single ticket, and that will be enough just to for you to hop and off the bus all day, all you want. So the tour costs around 20,000 won or $17 for adults. You can purchase the tickets both online and offline. There is even a 30% discount once a month in November, so you should definitely check that out. And other than the traditional culture course, there are other courses as well, such as Hangang Jamsil course and the night view course, where you can enjoy some of the Seoul's most stunning illuminations. And if you go on the website, seoulcitytourbus.co.kr, then you can find out more information about them. The website is offered in other languages as well, including English, Chinese, and Japanese. So don't worry if you can't read Korean. You should be able to find the language that you speak on the website. All right, so this is a great way for you to just look at Seoul, and this is a perfect way, especially for people like me who like being in the out, but not much of a planner. Like if you don't want to go through the trouble of looking at places where to go and figuring out what transportations to take. And also, if you're visiting Seoul for the first time, then it's also great to see how Seoul is laid out and just figure out how to get around the city more easily. This has been Chun Song-cho reporting live. I hope you enjoyed today's ride with me. Back to Sunny in the studio.
All right, Song-cho, thank you very much for those sights and sounds within Seoul. In our panel session on this Monday, we delve into ongoing efforts here and elsewhere to contain COVID-19 as we adapt to a new normal. For more, I have Professor David Kwak from Suncheon University. Welcome back, Professor Kwak.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
I also have Dr. Kim Seung-taek from Institute Pasteur Korea. It's a pleasure to see you again, Dr. Kim. Professor Kwak, we'll start with you. It's been 2 weeks since the start of Korea's exit strategy, and the number of severely ill COVID-19 patients has been on a persistent rise. How do you assess the situation on the local front?
Well, let me begin with making a little different statement here, that I don't assess the numbers in the ICU beds actually is a continuous rise. Rather, it's fluctuating. As I mentioned before, the number of ICU beds that are being taken, it sort of fluctuates, and it's not completely a true representative of what's happening now. It's usually an accumulation of what's happened before about prior 2 months or so, because people don't necessarily get severe right away from the point of time that they get infected. So we can pretty much say, we can sort of anticipate the people currently being in the ICU beds to be from those who were infected probably a month or 2 months ago, or even some of the cases, in rare cases, they could have been infected very recently as well. But I also want to iterate the fact that it fluctuates because over the weekend, we started going into the weekend by having the number at around 485. And as Soa reported today, it's gone down to now, I think, 471. The government is currently stating that they would take into consideration and possibly go into some a different mode once we hit a 75% of the fill-up of the ICU beds before we begin processing the plan differently. So we're really playing with a cup that's about 2/3 of a full. But the huge difference is that we can either add more water into it or take out water into it depending on the situation. We have to keep the number low, obviously, but we should not be completely panicked just because we've hit high 400s of the number currently. What we should instead do is focus on how we would maintain that even lower than currently, but we should not be completely panicked just because we have higher 400s of the numbers currently.
Right. And against that backdrop, Dr. Kim, what are your prospects of the launch of Phase 2 of Korea's exit strategy come mid-December, given the current COVID-19 situation?
Well, the sort of just living with the COVID-19 goes some stepwise manner, as we just said, and then we are currently on the phase 1, and then the transition to the next phase is not really just automatically. We actually just evaluate the current situation and then the effect of the easing some social restriction, and basically the 4 weeks of just running the new phase and then followed by the 2 weeks of the evaluation of such the easing of the situation. And then actually, one of the main just the parameter that we actually judge regarding the transition is the number of just the beds for the severe COVID-19 patient, as Dr. Kwak said. And then one of the actually the aims of the transition for this living with COVID-19 is that actually we actually evaluating each different parameters of just social restriction measures. The parameters is the first one is the business hours, and the second one is the number of participants in the private meetings, and then the third one is the restriction on the certain business operations. But somehow in the phase 1, we somehow just all of these three are somehow just a little bit just eased on. So then the problem is it's not really, so now it is a little bit just difficult to just judge which actually factor actually just affects more just significantly than those others. So that's kind of just a concern among some of the experts in all those current measures. So basically, the current situation just might be, there's some chance of just maybe just maintaining just some stable level, like just a 400 or like less than 500 levels, and also maybe just go up just above the 500. We will see, but then the number of the beds available would be just the main just determinant whether we go for some next phase or not.
Right. And staying with the response from the medical arena, Professor Kwak, how is the medical system here on the local front coping with the surging cases of serious illnesses?
Right. So to the best of my knowledge, I think the government is currently noticing that we could probably handle up to about 500 or less of the ICU beds filled up with much ease. But they're also, to the best of my knowledge, over the weekend, they've requested private sector hospitals to increase the number of ICU beds that they can provide. So they're hoping that with higher numbers of capacity, we'll be able to have a buffer zone, so to speak, to handle even further higher up numbers. But that's from a personal or medical doctor's point of view, that's not entirely the picture that we should have in regards to ICU beds, because it's not just the physical numbers of beds that can provide the service, but rather we also need specialists who can take care of these patients while those people are in the ICU beds. So that's one of the most concerning factors to me personally, being a medical doctor. But also I see this picture wholesomely kind of in a different way. As I said, the numbers of ICU beds capacity fluctuates depending on how many incidents of cluster infections in the elderlies we have during that time. But also further going on, I think with the higher implementation of vaccination rates, especially among the elderly people and with underlying diseases, I think there's also a great chance that we might even decrease in the ICU beds fill up in the future, since we have higher number or higher rate of vaccinations from those people who are more vulnerable to the disease or severe progression of the disease. Number two, it's very likely that we'll have a completely new regimen of treatment become available sometime in the near future. Let's say if that was to happen, let's say 2 to 3 months later, from that point on, we might even see even further lower numbers in ICU beds, because those drugs are meant to come into place early on in the phase of the disease. Also, number three, this is my rather personal suggestion. Currently, I think private sector hospitals treat people who are either moderate or severe in the progress according to their own decisions. There is no set of protocols that is equal to throughout the nation. So most of the common pictures that I noticed is that rather these doctors, us being medical people, because we have to take responsibility for how we treat them, they start treating certain group of people much later on in their progression of disease rather than earlier in the phase. Number two, they also decide to treat with those regimens only for those people who are more vulnerable, such as those who are elderly or with underlying diseases. I think the government can possibly, let's say, request from a committee of specialists to make a formal protocol for the nation to take, so as to take more aggressive approach to the patients all throughout, much early on in the progression of the disease. So for example, if we were to take start giving out treatment regimens such as remdesivir or monoclonal antibodies, which we have in hand already, to the people who are even younger in ages. Let's say those people who are 40s and 50s, maybe with hypertension, maybe with diabetes, rather than only limiting that to people of 70s and 80s, then we would also be able to see much less numbers filling up in the ICU beds, because it can possibly stop the progression of the disease much early on. So that's only my personal suggestion, though.
Right, but it is a valid point right there.
I would hope so.
Right. Dr. Kim, recent findings show 1 out of every 3 new patients involves a person aged 60 and above. Now, having said that, the government, of course, is calling for the importance of booster shots. Aside from booster shots, what else do you propose to deal with the rising number of cases among those who are older?
Well, as you said, the bu스터샷 might be just probably the best one that we actually come up with right now. And then second one is actually just some strengthening some restriction measures for certain some age groups. For example, like some regular PCR test for just people working in the some nursing hospitals, and also some for some visitors as well. And then also, as Dr. Kwak said, maybe we can also implementing the widening, the more wide use of monoclonal antibodies as well, to basically decrease the number of severe COVID-19 patients.
Right. Now, containing COVID-19 remains a priority not just here in Korea, but also in Germany. Authorities there are battling a resurgence that pushed the daily tally to over 50,000 cases last Thursday. For more, I have Jan Rubel live on the line. Rubel, it's been a while. Jan, it's been a while, that is. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, Jan.
Good to see you again, Sunny.
It really is, Jan. Now, I hear there has been a retreat in the daily tally today since last Thursday's alarming figure. Do start with the overall situation there in Germany. And Jan, do tell us a bit about the reasons behind the recent rise in infections there.
Well, you know, the incidence is rising strongly. And, you know, we had a calm summer. Everybody felt relieved. But then happened what the scientists had already predicted a long time ago, and now we saw in the last 7 days 303 infections per 100,000 infections. And of course, this puts a lot of pressure into the system. And we have now more than 3,000 people in the intensive care units. And this means for other patients that a lot of other surgeries have to be postponed. Even some patients have been flown out to Bolzano and Merano in Italy. And this is, of course, a difficult situation. I mean, until now, the hospitals give us a notice that it's still under control, but I mean, soon they will reach the limit. That is pretty sure.
I see. Jan, at least 67% of Germany's population of 83 million is fully vaccinated, and there appears to be little change in that rate itself. Now, is vaccine hesitancy still an issue there? And if so, how are authorities in Germany seeking to address it?
You know, this is our main issue because, you know, most of the infections we are facing now are with the unvaccinated. And until now, we have 68% in Germany who are fully vaccinated. But it is simple. We didn't reach the critical mass of vaccinated people in Germany in order to curb the spread of the virus. And the problem is, of course, who is until now not vaccinated doesn't want to be vaccinated. So the question is how to reach them, how to convince them. And yes, the government is promoting vaccinations, of course, but not massively, because we are in Germany, the politics is in a kind of a limbo now. You know, we had elections in September. The old government is only managing. The new government is still not in power. And this keeps us all in a vacuum. And nobody knows how to proceed now.
Right. And talking about the unvaccinated, Jan, neighbouring Austria has reimposed movement restrictions against the unvaccinated, while the Netherlands has reintroduced a partial national lockdown. What options are being explored by Germany then?
Well, until now, there are no lockdowns being planned. But as we see the situation now, it can change very fast. I could imagine a lockdown just before Christmas, by example, or that we will have to see installed the so-called 2G reglement in Germany, which means that only vaccinated or recovered people get access to certain institutions or services. A harsh lockdown like we are going to see in Austria, I don't see this happening in Germany unless the figures become really catastrophic. And how to go on now, this is really difficult to forecast. I mean, of course, we know we need some pressure, but, you know, it's in Germany like in any other country. You ask 2 Germans, you get 3 answers. And when you ask me personally, I think we spent a lot of time trying to convince people. Now it's time to act. Now it's to put some pressure into act.
Jan, do you see perhaps a change in testing options over in Germany to encourage people, well, to better keep track of infections there?
Yes, of course. The new government promised to continue or to recontinue with testing. But I am asking myself, you know, I'm not an expert. I'm writing about politics. But I'm asking myself, what can tests help now in this situation? Only vaccinations can help, because nobody knows if these tests are working really, really good unless they are PCR tests. But these are not the tests we are talking about in Germany. So I think testing is a nice maneuver for not doing nothing.
Right. What about the academic arena, Jan? Is that being left open, given the potential risks exposed to teenagers who have yet to be vaccinated in Germany, right?
Yes, people above 12 years, they can be vaccinated, and until now schools are open, and this is what the government is giving as our message, that the schools shall remain open until the last thing we are going to stop. But the situation is now difficult, and we will see what's going on. You know, since the beginning of the pandemics, in the first and the second lockdown, the young ones, the students, the pupils, they were the first ones to suffer. And now there is a promise that they will be the last ones to suffer due to restrictions, but I'm not so sure if the government really can help this promise.
Right. Moving on, Professor Kwak, the European Medicines Agency recently recommended Celltrion's antibody therapy, Recurona. What are the implications of this vote of confidence from Europe's drug regulator?
Well, it signifies their recognition of legitimacy of the efficacy of this particular treatment regimen. I think it'll be beneficial both to the country that starts to use it and also to the company in Korea as well. The fact that they can they have another tool at hand to really approach the patients before they become severe in their progress, it'll be very much of a high benefit to the countries that start to use it, but also at the same time, as the exporting country, we would also benefit from the sales of it. Now, from the clinical point of view, though, is that it's still an IV drug, so it has to be applied to patients who are in a situation inside the hospital being admitted to receive the IV, as opposed to the oral regimens that are bound to be hit the market pretty soon. So I guess in a sense that we have to sort of protocol or come up with a protocol so that before the oral regimens become available, we would be able to actually use these products to the appropriate people. That's one of the homeworks that I guess both the countries and the company has to do currently.
Right, and staying with Celltrion's Recurona, Jan, I hear the approval process for this antibody therapy has been proceeding at a prompt pace there. Could you tell us more?
Yeah, this gives us hope. The European Medicines Agency has paved the way for approval of this medicament, Recurona. And now it is up to the EU Commission to give the final decision. But you can assume that this would be only a formal decision, that it will be approved soon. This is a good perspective because I think it's very important to have a variety of therapies fighting this virus.
Right, of course. All right, Jan, as always, thank you very much for the latest from your part of the world at this hour.
I thank you, Sunny.
Right, now Dr. Kim, do tell us a bit more about the effectiveness and safety of Celltrion's Recurona.
Well, in terms of effectiveness, like some monoclonal antibody that was already just approved in the U.S., its efficacy is about just 70 or 80% effective in just preventing progression to the severe COVID-19. That was actually true for other monoclonal antibodies like Eli Lilly, Regeneron, and then Vir Biotechnology, and then GSK. That's actually the same. And then, but this drug has to be used for the early viral replication phase, not in the later inflammatory phase. And and in terms of safety, this is an antibody. So antibody is something that is actually already circulating in our body. So this is kind of a protein. So in terms of safety, it is good. But early in the pandemic, there was some concern, and even in monoclonal antibodies and then the vaccine, because there's some earlier reports about some it is so-called antibody-dependent enhancement. That's actually very well-known effect in some dengue infection. For the dengue infection, the primary infection does not make some serious problem. But in the secondary infection, especially with some different genotype of antibody, the genotype of virus, that the presence of the prior antibodies raised by the primary infection, that actually enhances the secondary infection. Enhances secondary infection and also exacerbates the disease. This kind of very similar kind of effect was also observed in some SARS-CoV-1 infection, at least some experimental setting. So earlier concern was whether this kind of antibody-dependent enhancement would be observed in some SARS-CoV-2. But in the end, we did not observe such kind of thing. So basically, this was the most severe concern, but now this is resolved. So in terms of safety, I think this is okay. And Well, the safety and safety and the efficacy is pretty good. So as Dr. Kwok said, since we have these monoclonal antibodies in our hands, I think we have to use more just widely. I mean, just widely. We have to cover many more patients, not just some small group of patients. So then we can ultimately just decrease the number of severe COVID-19 cases. So that's the case. So and ultimately just oral antiviral would play a major role because those kind of antiviral would be administered at the outpatient setting. This is very important, especially in some pandemic situation. But still, monoclonal antibodies. This is the one we have right now. So this can be very usefully employed right now.
Right. And Professor Kwok, Moderna has acknowledged that its vaccine does indeed pose a greater risk of myocarditis compared to other vaccines, especially for those under the age of 30. Do you believe there needs to be a shift in Korea's offer of Moderna vaccines, that is?
Well, there's actually two sides to this picture or story. So it was shown that Moderna actually is showing about 5 times more of the myocarditis happening in people who are under 30 years of age, and those happen to be male. But also at the same time, Moderna shows probably the littlest breakthrough infection rate compared among the different types of vaccinations. So two different benefit and ratio risk that we have to sort of calculate. I think it's a homework that government has to currently come up with the results for. But at least for the time being, even the myocarditis happening are quite mild in clinical cases. So not currently, I don't think the government is going to stop the usage in even younger generations. But they would definitely have to look into this more thoroughly and possibly decide whether or not to still further ahead use the Moderna shots for people who are under the age of 30.
Right. All right, Professor Kwok, as always, thank you very much for your insights. And Dr. Kim, thank you very much for your thoughts and time. Right, as health officials and experts have been saying, a sustainable transition into a new and safe normal amid COVID-19 depends on the efforts of all members of the society. Thank you for watching. See you on Tuesday.